Hello and welcome to a fairly brief discussion of scholarly writing. So, for those of you that are new to writing at a master's level at a university setting or higher, it's the same basic stuff from the time you graduate on. You use a different template and you write in a different way. And so, one of the things that I usually try to encourage every student I bump into is to follow kind of a pattern similar to what I will present here. That's not to say you have to do it as I do it, but this is an approach that I found that works well, and I've seen others use it as well. So jumping straight in to the topic, um, and we will be going from the topic, so being given a area or a field in which to discuss something, all the way to a rough draft. And then from the rough draft, the only real difference will likely be the removal of the mistakes that you may have made creating it. So there's a pattern that we follow that it's essentially recursive in nature, and it's about an introduction, content, and conclusion. You'll see this in multiple things. If it's some sort of a book, sometimes there's a preamble, then there's the actual content, and then there's or an epilogue at the end, perhaps. But you'll see this in the papers that you write, and in general, you have a introduction that is a section of the paper, likely a paragraph. It could be multiple. That spaces kind of sets the context. It lets the reader know what's the point. Why am I looking at this? And what are you going to talk about? Then you actually talk about it. So you'll introduce the very basic thing that you're going to discuss. So the be it the thesis, the thesis statement may be relevant and present inside of this area. And it may be something as simple as restating, never copy and paste an assignment, but it may be restating that assignment in your own words as a paragraph, basically saying what it is that you're going to be talking about. You may even, if it's a relatively large, give the reader kind of mile markers to know where they're at in the paper. And we do that through the use of headings. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment as well. And then you'll have the actual content that you'll go through, then the conclusion where you restate the topic, the thesis statement, the point. You restate that and basically help the reader understand how you covered it and that you have done what you said you were going to do. It does this concept, this pattern applies to a paper. It applies to a section within the paper. So if you're using headings underneath of that first in that first paragraph under the heading, you'll want to introduce the point of that heading. So why are you organizing it this way? So you're going to talk about that section of what it is you're going to talk about. Then you're going to present a material, and then you're going to conclude that section by preparing the reader for the next section. And it also applies to a paragraph. You have a topic sentence or a single sentence that introduces the point of the paragraph. Then you'll talk about it, and then you'll provide some evidence as to why it is that you've met what you've introduced, and then you'll wrap it up and essentially hook into the next paragraph. And this is a recursive pattern that is pervasive. And if you follow this simple approach, you'll do pretty well. Just by putting stuff into this structure, you'll likely have a pretty good grade. That's just the reality. It's what instructors like to see. It's what readers like to see. We like to know what's coming. We like to know where we are in the process. And then we like to know what you've told us. We like it to be reinforced to make sure we really understood what you were trying to say. So here's an example. So imagine you were asked to write 300 to 400 words discussing a security policy implementation. You're asked also to define the concepts, provide the major elements, and then describe the importance and include the challenges that might be faced. And then you're told that you need at least three scholarly sources. And three scholarly sources for 300 to 400 words might be on the light side, depending upon how well you're writing. When you start your work here, you basically want to make sure, this is stating the obvious, that you're capturing the assignment, all of the assignment parts. Don't forget to do one. And what I typically will do is create a rough outline that ensures that I cover them off underneath. It would be in the content or the main body of the paper. And then you could do a proper outline with bullet points and so on with indentation. You start off on the top level with those will be your heading level ones. If there's subtopics to discuss underneath of each one of those, you would drill into it. Those would be heading level twos and so on. And you'll always introduce the introductory section or paragraph of the paper, but note that it is special in that you don't have to put a header in front of it. We know that the first thing after the title on the first page of content in an APA formatted paper is the introduction. You don't have to tell the reader that is the case. That is by design, and it is to help it be smooth, not necessarily aesthetics, although it does help a little bit. You'll also want to make sure that you always include a conclusion section. Everything you write should have an introduction, a body or content, and then the conclusion. And then if you make a claim, so if you know some piece of information that isn't the point that you're trying to make, so it's not the thesis statement and it's not a topic sentence in a paragraph, you need to make sure that you have a citation on it to support that claim. And you may or may not have that on the first sentence. Most instructors would tell you it should not be, because the first sentence should be the topic sentence of the paragraph. The evidence is where you would need to support the claim, right? So you introduce you make a statement that something is something, and then you supply evidence, and that evidence comes from sources that you reference via citation. Whenever you're writing within a paragraph and you happen to be using the same source on more than one sentence, you should include it on the first sentence, and you don't have to do it again within that paragraph unless you happen to be shifting back and forth between multiple sources. And it's to make sure that you're doing proper attribution of each piece of evidence that you're presenting. So in our example, we might have an outline that is the introduction, definition, and major elements, the importance, the challenges faced, and then a conclusion. And at this point, you probably want to start thinking about what are you going to call this paper. So on your paper, you will have a title. The title goes on the title page. Amazing, right? Shocking that the title is on the title page. And it also goes on the first page of content at the top, centered in bold. And so the title should be relatively short, but it sometimes takes a little bit to come up with a good title. It should be descriptive, short, and short as you can make it, largely speaking, but it should be expressive enough that the reader can understand what it is that you're going to say. So we start writing the paper. You want to use an APA Word format. If you have trouble finding one, let me know. I'll track one down and supply it to you. It is essential. It helps you. It will save you time, because while APA 7 made some changes and some revisions, there's still some things that you need to do. In the past, you had to use Times New Roman. That was the font to use for APA writing. It's been relaxed to a set of fonts, but you have to pick one and stick with it. And spoiler, if you're writing this in an academic setting and the fonts change dramatically a lot, it's going to let your instructor know you're copying and pasting from something. So if nothing else, get everything into the same font for that reason. And frankly, there's no reason that the font should ever change. You pick one, stick with it. So you don't have a heading 1 that corresponds to the introduction. That's what we talked about a moment ago. But you will have heading level 1s for those 3 items, the definition, importance, and challenges. And then the conclusion also has a heading 1. Heading 1 is bold and centered. You'll see an example of it in a little bit. And also, APA is not pretty. Don't make it pretty. It's not meant to be pretty. It is a manuscript format. That means that it's really intended to be supplied to publications for them to make it pretty. So don't try to make it pretty. You'll also need a short title that goes on the running head. The running head is the top left-hand corner. We'll see it in a moment. Should be all uppercase. and it's doesn't have the word running head any longer. In the past, you used to have that. No, you no longer do. So in this case, security overview is our running title and the page number. The reason for this is a bit historical and may go away over time, though it hasn't yet. Imagine, if you will, a time when things were typed on a typewriter. Everything was on paper. And imagine also that you're someone that receives multiple submissions that may not be stapled together, because that could be impactful to the publishing process. And if you had even two different manuscripts and you dropped them on the floor and they got mixed up together, this is a way of simply pulling them back apart, because the running head is on every page, as is the page number. And the page number is upper right-hand corner. The title goes in the middle of the page, roughly, centered and bold. Your name and then your university that you're affiliated with comes next. Or if it's a business, a commercial venture or a nonprofit or whatever, that would be the organization. So if you work for a healthcare company or whatever, it would be that organization's name, meaning that that's who you're affiliated with. That it goes back to kind of helping build your credibility and your bona fides. An abstract, don't do it, is the short answer, unless you've been told to do so, or you may want to ask the instructor in your course on the first week, do you want abstracts in any of your submissions? Because generally speaking, you do not. Most instructors don't want them, and generally speaking, students don't get them right. It's a hard thing to do correctly, because it is not really a summary, but a very terse representation of your paper in a single paragraph, and with no indentation on that first sentence, which is the exception to the rule in the APA world. It is, as I said, it's harder to get right than it is to get wrong. So generally speaking, don't do it. The content is what starts on after that title page. And you'll want to include on the very first page a repeat of the title, just as it appeared on the title page. You don't have two different titles. The title shouldn't be the assignment name. It should be something that identifies briefly the contents of that paper. Generally speaking, everything in APA is left justified. The first paragraph or the first sentence of the paragraph is indented. Everything is double spaced, generally speaking, sometimes exceptions in the references. But I'll say it again, do not include an introductory heading at heading level 1. So I should never see introduction bold and centered on your paper. It doesn't go there. And generally speaking, you can see inside of Microsoft Word the settings that you'll want to be set. One of the advantages of using a template is this stuff will already be set up correctly for you ahead of time. Here's an example of what an APA template looks like after having replaced the title with the title from the title page. I put a little reminder for myself in each one of the sections to tell me what I need to do. And then I also do so for the conclusion and so on. So this is basically transforming from your outline to the headings. Notice everything here is centered because these headings are heading level 1, right? So this right in through here is heading 1. You don't want to have it to the left until you go to heading level 2. That will only happen inside of a heading level 1, and it should not go straight from heading level 1 to heading level 2. There should be a paragraph that introduces that section. And then at some point, you might have subsections that you go into. Generally, you should only add those whenever they're adding significant value to how the paper is organized. Makes it more approachable and understandable. The next step is you've got yourself started. You know roughly what it is you need to write about. You want to go do some research, right? And generally speaking, you want to do some keeping track of your research, and you do that inside of a tool. Two good examples of those tools are EndNote and Zotero. Zotero is similar to EndNote, but I still, even as an individual who pays for it out of their own pocket, purchase EndNote. It is a superior product, in my opinion. You may have a different opinion, and it may be that it's cheaper for you to get it for free from Zotero. Many universities provide EndNote to their students, so check and see if you have a license for it. And what it'll let you do is keep track of all of the research that you do, and especially if you're a doctoral student or have aspirations to become one. It's important because it lets you build your own personal library. So as you're reading things, you can download the PDF and attach it to the reference material. So you're not only capturing who wrote it, what's the title, where was it published, and so on, but the actual contents, as well as you have the ability to make your own notes. And you can also rate them, put stars on them, and so on, so that you can find things later on. And also, you'll find that most of these tools have a free-form search, so they will search through the contents of those papers, not just the titles or your notes. So, if nothing else, you want to be using one of these tools. They do integrate with Word. They also, I know EndNote recently added an addition to EndNote, or to integrate with Google Docs. So you really want to think about it, because it will save you a lot of time. Plus, it takes care of all of the formatting and so on for you. You do still need to make sure that as you're doing your research, you make sure that what goes into that tool is correct, right? Because garbage in, garbage out. So make sure that the capitalization is correct, make sure the author's names are presented the right way, and so on. Your next step is to go to your university library or possibly scholar.google.com and type in some search terms. This is where keywords become really important. This has gotten better over time. Generally speaking, you want publications that are less than 5 years. One thing that you'll want to take note of: don't assume that Bard or Gemini, or whatever they call it this week, or Copilot, or whatever tool you might be using that uses generative AI and large language models, don't trust, if you tell it that you want APA citations, that it'll be correct. Sometimes large language models hallucinate. They make things up. I have seen instances where a large language model made up a publication or a journal entry, a reference essentially that did not exist, a page number that didn't contain what it said was on those page numbers, the journal number didn't line up, and so on. It simply just made it up. Some of us are pretty much intelligent enough to know that you might be using generative tools as part of your publication. I would strongly advise you not to do that. And if you do that, you want to make sure that you're doing so in a scholarly fashion. You should treat any kind of generative tool as an aid to help you learn, not a replacement for you doing research and knowing how to read and write at an academic level. After you've done your research, you go out and you find some citation. In the case of both Zotero and EndNote, you want to click on the thing that says EndNote at the bottom of, in this case, Google Scholars page. You may also see RIS as a format. It's essentially a file format that Zotero and EndNote know how to import. You click on that, it'll open up a file that gets downloaded into your downloads folder. You'll also want to download the PDF. Whenever you click on that downloaded file, it will open up a tool such as Zotero, is what you see here. And having imported the information that came from that citation. And so you can see just by that point alone how much this can save you some time. Whenever you go and use this citation, it will insert it appropriately and also keep track of your references for you in the proper order, alphabetical order. You'll also want to make sure that you attach that PDF, as you can see right below the title, so that you know that it is there. Your next step is to go through, review the publication, and see, is this any good? So you'll basically start by reviewing the findings and the conclusion. So typically I read the abstract, at least skim it, and then also the same thing with the findings and conclusion. And then if it still looks good, you might dig into the actual outcomes of the paper. You should only cite that information which is new to that paper. Don't cite secondary citations, right? Which is when you cite something that's citing something else. If there's a citation on the thing that you're using, it's fair game to go to that source, look it up in the references. That's what they're there for. Go retrieve it, and then read the article yourself and then cite it. That's fair, but don't do secondary citation. It's inappropriate. The only thing that you should really be pulling is from the conclusion, right? So, and in the case here, the outcome of this paper was that it did come up with a framework for essentially constructing a security, developing and implementing an effective information security policy. So it's talking about a framework that is proposed. It also tells you what, in the highlighted section in the bottom, kind of what it's positioning itself. What is it trying to say? This is a well-written paper. This paper argues that is the title, or that is your thesis statement. You want to have something that is that easy to find. You don't have to write the abstract. It's in this because it is a published article. But you want to keep track of this. Then you want to jump down to the conclusion, see what they concluded, because the conclusion should be very clear on what the outcomes of the research were. Then you may actually jump up into the part where they talk about what it is that they did that is new in this paper. Oftentimes papers include a literature review. That's where they talk about the current state of the art and of whatever it is they're talking about. And so in that section, it's a great place to go find additional resources to go look at. Don't be citing from there, right? You should be citing from the parts that are the contributions to the body of knowledge by this paper. So that's an important thing to understand. Also, note that the conclusion is restating the thesis statement, and also it shows what the research did, what it did what it said it was going to do. And so there's some key takeaways that I highlighted in there as well. Then you start kind of taking what you've read and turning that into some paragraphs. And this is where, in this case, I'm citing on the first sentence because I'm actually introducing something that I wouldn't know otherwise, right? How would I know that a security policy implementation has been created if I haven't read that paper? So that's why my citation is on that. A better style of writing is that you introduce what is going to be discussed about. So if you say that frameworks are a common way of solving complex problems, right? That wouldn't need a citation because it's a generalized statement. You're not necessarily doing anything that's really stating anything all that controversial, right? So just keep that in mind. It's important, though, that you do cite somewhere within that paragraph, ideally on the first sentence that is using the information. And if you fail to do so, we've moved from discussions around appropriate levels of summarization into plagiarism. And that's a conversation I prefer not to have with a student. Or any instructor really doesn't want to have that conversation. So make sure you get a citation in there each time you pull something that has come from you. And not telling you that you should do it, but if you were to use generative text approaches, you would want it to summarize potentially as much context, as much of the paper as you could give it, have it summarize the outcomes of a paper. And even then, I strongly recommend you read it and learn it for yourself, and write from it. Avoid the approach of copying and pasting and changing using synonym replacement or some other more advanced approach. Just do it yourself. All right, that's the point. The whole point of going to a university is to gain knowledge. So how do you do that if you don't, actually do the work? So when you're writing a paragraph, the first sentence should be the main point of the paragraph. It may or may not require citation, depends on if you're making a claim. In my case, I was, and I needed some proof to support that claim. You want to view that first sentence as an introduction to the paragraph. You want to make sure you introduce evidence that supports your claim, and then you wrap up that paragraph and prepare the reader for the next paragraph so that it flows smoothly. You can think of it as like crochet or something. You're hooking things together in a smooth way so that it naturally transitions. So you want to repeat this process. You go out, you find a source, you read the abstract conclusion and introduction. If it's a good source, keep going, being prepared to pitch it as you go. How do you know what good looks like when you're reading that paper? Well, where was it published? Generally speaking, it's hard to get a bad article published in a good source. So most of the things by ACM, IEEE, and so on are going to be high quality. Things that are published in open forums may or may not be good. It depends on the paper. There's some excellent stuff that has been published on blogs even. For example, the introduction of the concept of the Internet of Things was first on a blog post. So if you were writing, say, a dissertation that talked about Internet of Things related technologies, it would be appropriate to cite that blog post because it is the seminal source of the introduction. And then as you're doing your research and doing this process over and over again, you're basically looking to fill out your outline. Right? So you're filling it out, searching based upon the things that you're trying to find. And then there are a few more kind of just high level things to take away. Some rules, if you will, when we're writing at an academic level. So academic writing is all about clarity and precision. We want it to be very clear who said what. So you avoid, to enable that, things like it, this, they, them, we, you, one, him, her, he, and she, or they, or whatever, because it doesn't tell you who they are. So instead of saying this, if you use the word this and you're using Grammarly, and you don't say what this is, so this phenomena, if you just say this is an indication of, that's an unclear antecedent. So that's exactly what this bullet point is talking about. You don't use contractions, spell the words out. That's again for clarity. And a sentence should contain a single thought, a paragraph, a single idea. You do want to use Grammarly. It is an excellent tool. It will help you become a better writer, not just get better grades. It will actually improve your writing over time. And each paragraph should contain an idea. It should have 3 to 5 sentences, at least one citation, likely 2 or more. And you'll want to use the meal plan, which we'll talk about here in a second. The 3 to 5 sentences, you have your topic sentence, you have evidence, then you have a conclusion. That's where 3 comes from. In APA, 1 sentence paragraphs are a legitimate thing. It speaks to it. But it's exceedingly rare, and you may even have a 1 sentence paragraph for power to call to action if you're writing that kind of paper. In our world of computer science and data science and analytics, the things that we present are dispassionate. We can't have an opinion, and if we do have an opinion, we certainly can't express it in our writing, unless we're writing it as a point of view or a position. So the meal plan contains the main idea, evidence, analysis, and the lead out. So the main idea, and this is lifted directly from Duke University. If you're interested in this, Google Duke University Writing Lab Meal Plan, because if you just do meal plan, you might find out what's for dinner tomorrow. So the main idea is the main message of the paragraph. It's often referred to as the topic sentence. Remember here, you're not writing a mystery novel. We don't want to know a whodunit. The idea is that it should be very clear as to what it is you're trying to get across. It should be crystal clear. It should be no ambiguity at all. And there should be a central idea, and the rest of it shows how that idea is true. And then the final sentence should prepare for the next paragraph. evidence, you want to support that claim. So you have a sentence that is the topic sentence. You want to support it with some evidence, how things fit together. All evidence requires a citation unless it's evidence that is being the outcome of a research effort that you've just conducted. So make sure you include evidence. And its analysis is not your opinion, right? It is taking data and logically making an analysis of it that demonstrates a point. So you're constructing a case, if you will, from almost like legal terms. Then the link and lead out. This is you tie to the larger topic. You gently link the results of the evidence and analysis to the claim you made, and you prepare the reader for the next paragraph. How do you know if your paragraph's any good? Can you, at a glance, tell the point? Is there evidence supporting any claims that are being made? And in general, if you're writing at an academic setting, there better be a citation on every, at least one per paragraph, with the exception of introduction and conclusion. Those are two sections where citations are not only not needed, they're often not welcome. You don't want them. You don't want to be making claims in your introduction or your conclusion that are outside of the scope of what is this paper about and what was the topic that you discussed. And then you want to take a look as you're reading it. Is the evidence analyzed or is it just presented? So is there something that, based upon some numeric values, that you can determine, or some fact? What is its contribution? How does that fact fit into the larger conversation? And so on. And then are there some weak spots inside of it? What you shouldn't do is copy from a source, use some sort of approach to change the words. Don't cite it and then claim it. You want to think of the idea that this is something that some cultures struggle with. And scholarly writing, we take the approach, and especially Western scholarly writing, that ideas belong to the author of the work, not just the words, but the actual ideas. So whenever I publish something, I have a claim to the contents thereof, and I should be given credit for my work. Failure to do so is theft. It's intellectual property theft is how we view it. So you do want to make sure that you are always attributing to the author. And here's an example. First of all, Wikipedia is not a scholarly source, so you shouldn't be using it. Scholarly sources are things that are published in academic, peer-reviewed journals or articles or collections. They are conference proceedings, is what I was thinking of. That is still considered academically reviewed, but a little bit less so. So think of it as like, A- kind of as you would view it. It's still good and above average, but it's still not as good as a journal. Journals are the idea thing. Books are also considered at the same level as journals, but books are often dated. It takes you 6 to 8 months to write a good book, unless you have a really large number of authors working on it. And even then, it'll probably take close to that. Just to get through the publication process. It takes a few months. Anyway, so you can see that whenever we're reading something that is being replaced with synonym replacement, it's pretty clear that it's been changed. So don't do it, because if you do, first of all, the reader's going to notice that it's weird. It doesn't work well. The English language has a lot of nuances. And so you want to make certain that you understand the context that a word is used, because the context allows the usage of certain words and not other words, and using them in the wrong context is obvious to a native reader of English or someone skilled in reading English. It is academic dishonesty. So it is not acceptable at any level of school, especially not in graduate school. It's not your thoughts, and you're presenting it as though it were. And you're going to at least fail that assignment. You may fail the course, and you may get kicked out of the university. So don't do it. Here are some resources that are appropriate, especially for our University of Cumberland students who may be watching. Also, there's the link to Duke's Writing Studio. and the meal plan. So do take a look at that. Some good stuff. Walden's Writing Center is good as well. There's a lot of effort that goes into trying to help you become a better writer. Take advantage of it. So finishing up the paper, you keep going until you come up with the title. You write an introductory paragraph. The introductory paragraph need not be that complex, right? It's basically just telling you what the paper is about and what you're going to talk about in the order that you're going to talk about them most likely. Then you'll have a conclusion. It's going to restate the introduction, oftentimes in past tense, so that you're basically saying, this is what I told you. And then, so to summarize it and pull it all together, you start with the thesis statement. That is the point. That is why you're bothering. Make sure you cover all the assignment requirements, because if you're writing this in an academic setting, you want to make sure that you cover all the points. If you're writing it outside of that in some other environment, you want to start with an outline, because there's a series of things you probably want to cover. If you don't write with an outline, especially in scholarly writing, your outcome will be very mixed, we'll say that. And that's being generous. You want to use an APA template. It's your friend. It'll make your life easier. You definitely start with that outline, turn it into headings in Word, then repeat the cycle of research, read and write, and then read and review, and then write and cite, using a research tool as you go, such as Zotero or EndNote. And then at the very end, I typically write the introduction and conclusion. That's what I do last. The conclusion is typically the last thing I write. Introduction next to the last. If you are required to write an abstract, it would be the very final thing that you write. And so with that, if you have any questions, let me know. Like and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing your comments. I hope you have a good day.